that he punched her. That is what she told me. And that there was a tussle with the door, whatever, and then that's how she ended up with the busted lip on her. Alright y'all, so welcome back to my channel. This is my official longer form video. So I am going to be talking about my long ass court case in family court. It was the most stressful time in my life, and I learned so much from that experience that I definitely just wanted to share what that was like, because I did not ever expect to be in court. I did not ever expect to be dealing with domestic violence allegations. I did not expect to be in court for 2 years. So let's just get us started on how this even happened. So my ex-husband and I, we didn't have a parenting allocation judgment that was entered in the court when we were divorced. We kind of just did, the let's email what we want to one another and come to some conclusion on how we're going to parent and co-parent and get him on the weekends and 1 day a week type of situation. And that's exactly what we worked out, right? So nothing was ever entered in court with relation to the parenting plan or anything like that. But we did have an understanding that once my son reached years old, that we would revisit, because I was nursing while my son was an infant, and scheduling and not having him at certain times was kind of tricky with the nursing, but he still had access to our son and things like that. So things got a little tricky when in September of 2022, I got a random text message from a random number. All right, that said, no, I'm not going to use anybody's names because I don't want those problems, but it said basically that my ex-husband was living with a woman, and they gave me the woman's name. So it literally said, let's say his name was Joe Blow. Joe Blow lives with, let's say her name is Cindy. Joe Blow lives with Cindy. And that's exactly how that started. And I'm just like, what the hell? How? Now, the reason why, and I'm looking down at my notes because I will ramble and I'm not trying to put y'all through that, but the reason why that was concerning to me was because I had understood, based on what he shared with me, that he was living alone with our son at a particular address. So me getting a text message that he lives with someone, I was just like, what the hell? And why wouldn't you tell me that? Right? So that was trigger number one. Then my mind started spiraling. I remember vividly that I was at a dinner for a celebration of a conference that I just concluded, and it was a good time. And then I got this text, and when I tell you the rush of anxiety that came over me, I was like, whoa. It was very concerning how I felt. So I leave the dinner and then I call him. No, I take a screenshot of the text message. I send it to him and I'm like, WTF? Explain. Immediately he doesn't answer. So I'm calling and I'm just like, I can't remember verbatim, but I remember saying, who the F is my son with? What the hell is going on? And initially he was denying. And I know who this particular woman is because she was with my ex-husband the entire course of our marriage. So that was also problematic and triggering. But I will say that for me, it was more so the upset that, and of course I would get a phone call while I'm recording. This is real rookie move. Do not disturb. Honey, pause. So I was saying before I was rudely interrupted by my lack of do not disturb, what the upset more so for me was that I'm thinking that my son is in one particular address, in a particular building. There were also little instances of random shooting or something that would happen around the address that he previously gave me, which would cause me concern, and I would be worried about them and seeing if they were okay, and they didn't even live there. How disrespectful. And I know people are going to ask, like, how did you not know what his apartment looked like? Da, 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 da. Well, we were divorced, and at the very least, I thought that my ex-husband would be very honest about what was going on with my child, right? I was very optimistic that he would at least be forthcoming with anything that related to our son, including where he was laying his head. So I never like did an inspection or walked in the house or let me see, because we weren't on that level. The second part to that is that everything was happening at my house. So the visitation and everything was happening at my house. So he was more so over my house more than I would be over his house. And initially, when we started our parenting plan and he started doing overnights with our son, he was in our marital home. Well, for some time, but I don't even know how long that was, because there's so many little lies in between that I found out. So yes, for some time he was in our marital home, and I just did not want to be present there. So everything was happening at my house. So initially, that is where my mindset was. It was a sting that the mistress, quote unquote, or the paramour, as my attorney called her, was involved with him currently and taking care of my child. And no one had the audacity to just have a conversation with me or let me know, no matter how messy or, of a sting the situation was. But dang, you're gonna lie about where my son is laying his head? What else are you lying about? And so much more came out after that. So that was the initial upset. And what immediately happened that night that I got the text message and I called him and he's denying everything was that I told him he was supposed to drop our son back off to the house the next day. And then that is where a little bit of truth and some of the adjacent lies came in. So boom, that happens. He comes over the house, he drops off our son, and he sits down on my couch and is just like telling me some of the truth about whatever this living arrangement was. These people were living together for a full year. Oh, was it a year already? Yeah, well, I'll say like 9 months, right? Because that prior year, I would say November of 2021, he told me that he was moving in to a new apartment, the fake address that he gave me. And from November of 2021 until September of 2022, that is the address that I thought he lived in. Well, of course, it was revealed that he lived in a whole different address in a whole different neighborhood with her and her child that she had from a previous relationship. And I didn't even know. I knew of her because I had some unfortunate communication with her when we were married still and when I was pregnant, and it was a whole mess with that. But I never knew she had a child. So you have your own daughter from your previous relationship living with a man, you take in his son as well, and you don't think that you should be having a conversation with the child's mother? Make it make sense, because that doesn't make sense. And I'll explain the logic behind that thought shortly. So anyway, he's at my house. He's telling me a little bit of this, a little bit of that. And I'm trying to piece everything together. Emotions are high. Like I am hot, red, hot, pissed off. Because I'm like, yo, you've been lying to me this entire time about where our son was living with you. Then you add on the fact that he's living with this woman who I know does not mean well for me. For my son, I can't say the same thing, but she does not mean well for me. And you have a whole other child living with her and him, and you don't tell me any of this? And this has been going on for a year? Mind you, my mind is like going racing, and I'm jogging my memory on everything that we were doing throughout this parenting plan and, figuring out divorce life. Couple of things. I would meet him. Sometimes I would have to go drop off our son to him, and he would make sure that I was dropping off our son an address that was close to this fake address that he gave me. Not their address, the fake address. And then I also hate to admit that he was also actively trying to get back with me, right? And I was entertaining the idea because I was so hell-bent and hopeful for my family. I never wanted to get a divorce, but the infidelity was a lot. Some of the emotional abuse was a lot. Physical abuse attempts was a lot. And it was turning me into a very ugly person. So the divorce needed to happen. But I was still very hopeful that, maybe this will change him, or maybe he'll go to therapy, and super hopeful for the change, and it never happened. So I was also entertaining potentially getting back with him. We were going on dates again. It was a hot mess. So that also was like, dang, so you divorce the wife, me, you go live with the paramour mistress, Then you are reversing the attempt to get back with me. And then what was your game plan, my dude? We were sharing houses because I bought a modest-sized home that is good for my son and I, right? We live in a nice-sized home. It's not huge. It was affordable for me, but I don't think that I could live in this house with another man. It's kind of tight, right? But it's my home. And it's perfectly fine. My son has his own room. I have my own room. I have an extra guest room. We good. But we were sharing homes and all this stuff and, dreaming again. So I was so perplexed as to how this all came to a halt. So then he asked him, he's telling me all these things, and some of the things are not making sense. Some of them are. So I'm just trying to piece everything together. And the thing when you are dealing with someone that is just notorious for lying, your confidence in whatever's coming out of their mouth is just not there. So you're really trying to take what they say as face value while knowing there's some in between. So it's like, but anywho, what kind of made me go, wow? I asked him specifically, so what was your end game here? Because there was only going to be so long that you can go with lying to me about where our son was living. What was your end game? And this man told me verbatim, well, if you would be open to us getting back together and you moved in and all this other stuff again, then I was just gonna leave that situation and we would be a family again. I was like, wow, that's messed up as hell. And for some reason, that right there just made me feel like icky, because while I don't owe that woman any type of respect, consideration, empathy because of what she did when we were married, she still has a daughter. She still is a woman. And I'm just like, you here playing with people's emotions. You played with mine when we were married, and now you're playing with her life and her child? Wow. So after that, he leaves my home, and then I was just like, yeah, nothing happens as far as my son going back to that house until me, you, and her can have a conversation. And what my intention was in having that conversation is to understand how the hell she would allow for a man to live with her and his son without making sure that I'm aware, right? To some extent. How you go on without having a child move into your home and a man move into your home, knowing that the child has a mother, and you don't make sure that you understand the level of care that is required and understood between these two parents. Super irresponsible. The other part of this conversation for me was just to understand what this living arrangement looked like. Now, I will say this. We all do well for ourselves. He makes decent money. She's a whole doctor. You know what I'm saying? So I didn't have a concern that the living situation was going to be piss poor or it was a dump. But it was more so, does my son have his own room? What crib are you having him sleep in? What is the situation with this little girl? How old is she? What are their interactions? How does my son understand who these people are in his life? You know what I'm saying? Those are things that I need to understand. Now, mind you, my son is only 1.5 at that point. No, wait, 2022. Okay, so at that point he's 2, excuse me. So his vocabulary is not quite there where he is able to verbatim tell me what's going on and formulate his sentences. So what I do not appreciate is that I feel like these individuals, my ex-husband and the paramour, took advantage of his innocence, where they knew, or I'll say my ex-husband knew, that he couldn't speak up for himself or tell me anything. So he was going to be able to escape through this little situation, no problem. That was so inappropriate. So I'm here waiting for my ex-husband to tell me, like, he gave me the address. I'm like, give me the address. All visitation stops until we can have a conversation. Me, you, and her. Give me the address. I need to understand. Give me a walkthrough of the house now, because now I don't trust anything that you're telling me. So it's like maybe a couple of days go by and then he sends me the address, but then there's like this lapse in time in which I hear from him, or the meeting is not happening. I give him some dates on when we can meet, and nothing is urgent for me because I'm also very mindful of how I'm feeling. And I wasn't gonna, this happened on a Friday night going into Saturday. I wasn't rushing to meet them on Monday because I needed time to process. Like, I needed to get myself in check, and I needed to have a conversation with my therapist, and I needed to talk to my mama and like kind of help these people, well, have these people help me rather calm down and like figure out what is the appropriate and best way to handle this situation. So after like a couple days, I reach out to her because I've had her number. I'm like, yo, and I'll share like some of the text messages and things like that. But I essentially say to her like, so I've learned that you and my ex-husband live together, and that you're also, you know, you have a child, and I have, you know, my son has been there. I need to understand what has been going on for the last year. And initially she doesn't respond to me at all, right? So I found that to be a little fishy. So I said, okay, so just wait, right? In the interim, I start reaching out to an attorney because in the midst of me learning about the lies and things like that, I just started looking into stuff. And I learned that the job that he told me he had was not true. He was making way more money. He was also actively working. You know, for some time he was an entrepreneur and wasn't working. He left his previous job and then he went back to that job. He told me he got demoted, right? And we settled on a child support amount that was okay, but it definitely should have been more based on where things were at that time. So I was just like, what the hell? So there were all these other lies that started to like, you know, come to a halt. So, I contacted an attorney and I wanted to just get everything officially filed in the court, parenting plan. And initially, the only thing was for us, right, to get the custody going and then try to formalize some type of parenting allocation judgment based on the parameters that we had already set and emailed each other and that we were going by, right? But in the midst of me contacting an attorney and retaining her for the child support modification, that Friday, I get a text message from old girl, okay, the paramour, saying, hey, can you please let me know when you have a moment to talk? I think I have an understanding as to why ex-husband Joe Schmo may have been, you know, lying, keeping secrets, and I would definitely like to shed more light on the situation. And initially, I was just like, this don't feel good, this don't feel right. I didn't want to be in contact with her again, alone, one-on-one, but at the same time, I was highly curious as to what the hell she had to share with me. So we get on the phone that Saturday, and I remember this vividly because it was a beautiful fall day, and I was going to take my son to the pumpkin patch with my sister that was in town. So she called me like an hour or two before, maybe a couple hours before we were supposed to leave to the pumpkin patch, and we had a conversation. And I learned in that conversation that he put his hands on her, allegedly, and I have to say allegedly because there's so much more that came up after that. But she tells me that he put his hands on her and wasn't aware that I wasn't aware that they were living together. And I'm just like listening, I'm just processing everything. It was so much stuff that she shared. But she also started to tell me about like how her daughter was, you know, concerned about their relationship and she feared him. All this stuff she started to talk about. We were on the phone for like maybe 40 minutes. And then it just got to a point where I'm just like, okay, I go take my son to the pumpkin patch. Like, this is a lot. I'm in contact now, actively on the phone, talking to the woman that was involved in my marriage. Like, I was highly triggered, but because I needed to understand what was going on, and because my son was exposed to certain things, I also was highly curious about the conversation as well. So our conversation then transitions into text messaging, right? So in the initial phone conversation we had, you know, she was telling me, how he found out he was cheating. No surprise there. She was telling me about numbers she found from women and strippers and all these things. And I was just like, yo, okay. So it was just like, you know, trauma bonding, it felt like. Like, I went through this when you were married with him and I was involved a little bit, but she made all these excuses as to whatever their relationship was when we were married, whatever, didn't care at that point because I didn't believe anything that she would tell me on that front. But I'm like, girl, why are you surprised that he was cheating on you actively with multiple women? Like, why are you surprised, my girl? Anyway, so it transitioned from that to text message because I needed to go. And then I was just like, okay, Dina, take all of this, him and her together, you're the ex-wife, like take all out of the conversation and try to understand what was going on around your child, right? And that's where things got a little funky for me because she sent me pictures of her injuries. She had a gash or a bump on her forehead, and then she had a busted lip. And what she explained to me on the phone is that they had gotten into this big argument because she confronted him on his cheating. She saw the text messages between him and I, about the house shopping and us going on dates and things like that. So they got into this big argument, and I don't remember she was kicking him out the house or whatever, but essentially she kicked him out the house, and then he was like refusing to leave or whatever. And she told me that he punched her. That is what she told me. And that there was a tussle with the door of their house, and then the force of whatever he was doing and the door and her right there, like there was some forceful, whatever. And then that's how she ended up with the busted lip on her face. So basically 2 injuries, right? I'm like, damn. So I look at these pictures. I'm like, oh my God. She had to go to the hospital. And the next day, the day that we actually were talking, like she had already kicked him out. She told him he would come back. And there were some exchanges of like what my experience with him was. And, like, oh my God, does he have a gun? The gun in the house or whatever? Because he had threatened me before. And threatened to kill me if he could get away with it. I remember vividly hiding the gun clips. This happened when I was pregnant. I hid the gun clips because I was too scared to go to the police, and then I was protecting him in a weird way. So I remember that, and for some reason that triggered me to be like, yo, where's the gun? I understand like escalation, that point concerned about her safety. Again, even though I shouldn't have been, right? But I'm a human, and I know what that fear feels like, and I was concerned about her at that time. And I asked her, like, do you have somebody to take care of your daughter and support you while you're going through this? Is there anything that I can do? I'm just letting you know my son will not be returning to that house. Me and him got to figure some things out, but let me know how I can help you. I would go to the police if you want to and help you file a police report. At that time, the statute of limitations was up for me, I think. But if I were to, I spoke to a friend cop of mine, and she was just like, if you and her file something against him together, because her situation, is more recent. But even before we got to that, the other point of contention that concerned me was, okay, so she's telling me about domestic violence. She's telling me about emotional abuse. She's telling me about these things that happened around my child with regards to how he treated her. And I'll be explicitly clear here that my concern was never about him harming my child, but it was about the behaviors that he was exhibiting in front of my son and around my son. And my son is not old enough to speak up for whatever may be going on in that house, whether it scares him, whether it makes him anxious. He was not of age to help me understand what was going on. Right? But she was telling me that, they got into several arguments and my ex-husband was being emotionally abusive. And some of the things that she shared about what was going on in that house was uncanny to what I experienced. Like even some of the wording that she used to describe whatever would come out of his mouth. I was like, damn, like it was so like deja, like I were reliving some of the things that I experienced. Right? So I was like, yep, I believed everything that she told me. Everything. Because of my experience. And there's no way that she would have had an inkling that I would have gone through that unless he told her. And I know he's not going to tell her that. So I'm like, yeah, no, these similarities are funny, right? So I believed everything that she said in that regard. And then the other piece that concerned me was that she described, heavy alcohol use and some drug use. And I was like, hold up now. Drug use, I wasn't surprised by. First of all, we live in Illinois. Weed is legal here. So I wasn't concerned about that. But there were other drugs that she mentioned that he in that I was just like, wait a minute. And my specific question, which you'll see over here, was, did he do that around the children? And she gave me this answer right here that triggered me to say, okay, we gotta look into this. And then my concern turned into a custody thing, because she alluded that he was high and drunk a lot. He potentially would drive with the children drunk. And, you know, I should get a drug test. I should ask for a drug test. And I was like, damn. So it went from an upset about a lie about the address to like physical, emotional abuse, and my son potentially being exposed to that. And I will say again, I never had a concern that he would harm our child, but I was highly concerned about what this woman was allowing around my child and what the nature of the relationship was turning into as a result of whatever behaviors my ex-husband was exhibiting in that house. And that's when everything hit the fan for in this custody case, and why things just started to spiral. And the weird thing is that whatever, she sent me text messages of their interactions, right? She could send me a couple of screenshots of their interactions, and we had no custody case at the time that me and her were talking. Like, I had barely gotten in contact with an attorney, and we were just doing child support modification. So there was no custody, anything involved. But in this text message that she shared with me about their exchange, is a screenshot of their conversation. He says to her, like, I hope you didn't talk to Dina about this because it's going to impact my custody case. And when I read that, I was like, custody case? I said, oh, this ain't nothing but some manipulation. And how dare you have this woman that you battered, allegedly, right? I have to say that, and more will come in other videos as to why I have to say that. But the fact that you would say that, and we literally have nothing custody, you wanted to make sure that you got in her head about whatever it is that you needed for yourself in this situation, and made her feel some type of way about the custody that he could or could not lose as a result of whatever she decided to say to me. That right there is where it kind of blew up. And then I had to contact my attorney for something else and retain her for a extension of the case that she submitted for the child support modification. And then it became a true custody situation, because I was not allowing my son to go back to that house. Mind you, at this point, my ex-husband has been kicked out of that house. Okay, so now he's looking for new housing. All right. And then because this is highly contentious, a guardian ad litem had to be appointed to our case and hear both of our sides, which, oh my God, that was the most frustrating part. That's a lie. Not the most frustrating part, but one of the top 3 things that really irks me about court case, because the guardian ad litem was horrible. Horrible. I'll get into that into another video. But listen, y'all, I'm just going to pause it there. And I'm probably going to break this up in like 2-3 videos with some tips about how to navigate the court system, because I learned so much, so many layers, and I'm editing my own videos, child, and it's taking me some time. The learning curve is a little steep, so I will follow up with a part 2 to this next week, and I'll extend when, you know, what everything looks like. He gets an attorney, I get an attorney, we get in front of the judge, we have this guardian ad litem, and I'll talk about what that experience was like and all of the things that were involved in what my asks were as it relates to the court case. Because the drug use, the physical abuse, now the main like event, my court case outside of the child support, and there were some parameters that needed to be placed in order to investigate those things, in conjunction with now the housing situation. So I'll pause it there and put a stop to it. Next week we'll continue on with the next part of the video, or call it a series, okay, of the series. And if you have any specific questions about navigating court, just based on some of the things that I shared that caused me to enter into them, please, you know, drop them in the comments. You can reach out to me, email me, and I'm happy to answer those questions to the best of my ability. But please note that none of this is legal advice. This is just my experience. And I have to say that because I am not an attorney. I was a client, and I'm just merely sharing my experience with the court system. All right. So thank you for tuning in. Excuse me. I will see you in the next video. Be sure to like, share, and subscribe. Like how jogging your memory, everything kind of hits you in your frontal lobe. Like, dang, everything like this. But please